myself. My name is Richard, and I'm not really here for any other reason. I'm not here to market my program or any of that kind of stuff, but I do want to say one thing, and that is I really thank you guys for being able to come out here and be interested in trying to understand a little bit more about what probably goes on in the schools, as well as what it is in regards to drug and alcohol addiction and abuse. Just a real little bit about myself. I went to Newport Harbor High School, so I know this area pretty well. Staunchia was one of our rivals. I think we beat them in soccer and football that year, but whatever. And when I was going through high school, one of the interesting things is I don't think it was any different then than it is now. I think the only thing that seems a little bit different is the variety that's available out there versus what the variety was back when I was getting high. For me, high school was kind of a blur more than anything else. I spent a lot of time trying to find ways to avoid high school rather than be a part of it. And so for whatever it's worth, it is stuck in my focus to be working with adolescents and especially their parents. One of the biggest things that I see, and I do work in the schools, I definitely work with Huntington Beach Unified School District, I work with Irvine Unified School District. At one point in time I actually worked with Newport Mesa Unified School District. And the problem is that there is such an ignorance that goes on in the school settings sometimes that there's even, like Phil said, a drug or alcohol problem. The funny thing about it, that from my experience, is that there's not so much as a drug and alcohol problem, because that's always been there. It's really an awareness problem. That's what is going on more than anything else. And the more fascinating thing is that in my experience, it's getting harder and harder to detect. It used to be really, really simple. You know, they ditched class, their grades are going down, they changed their friends, and guess what? They're probably drinking and using. The fun part, the interesting part that I'm starting to see or have over the last couple of years is that's not quite completely the trend. Kids are getting way more sophisticated. They're becoming a lot brighter in regards to how to get around detection. And they're spending a lot of energy in protecting their opportunities to go get high. We understand a couple of things about addiction, that it's progressive, that if it goes untreated, it's fatal, it leads to jail, institution death. We used to spend a lot of time thinking that it was very complex, and it was very misunderstood, because a lot of times people, in my experience, have always thought, especially as it relates to adolescence, it's just a phase, they'll grow out of this, it's only a matter of time, let's just kind of give them a couple of, hot conversations and hopefully we can scare them. And the reality of that is that it doesn't happen much, It does, there is an effect of sixth graders. When you go into a sixth grade elementary school and you blow them up, man, they are scared. They are dead scared. My kids come home from Dare Week or Red Ribbon Week or whatever, and I mean they are sworn off from drugs and alcohol. Because, Sergeant Joe came in and showed them pictures of what this crash or that crash looked like, and what happens if you get arrested with marijuana, and that you'll spend some time in juvie, and my kids, which are still kind of young, panic. You do that with a high school student, and they just look at you like you're stupid, or like you're high. Because the reality of it is that's not what their experience is. The reality of it is that that's not the consequences that they go through. They are invincible. Adolescence is the absolute beginning of knowing everything. And as we get older, obviously, we realize we know very little. And that's kind of the fun part. But with that 13-year-old or 14-year-old, I guess, who walks into high school, it is a completely new world. And it's an unbelievably scary world for them in almost every way. They got new friends, they got new cliques, they got all these choices, all these options in regards to sports or drama or whatever it is. And for the adolescent mind, sometimes their emotions haven't caught up to being able to make right or healthy choices. The solution I've always found, and again I model the program that I run, has always started at home. 100% has always started at home. And a lot of times it starts with parents taking a look at their own drinking and using behavior. Hopefully they're not using any drugs, but definitely looking at their drinking patterns and being able to see what it is maybe I'm modeling or what it is I'm maybe not modeling. That's always, I tell parents, the very first place to kind of look at is kind of look in your own backyard a little bit and see what you see there. Those family barbecues, are you watching your kids? Are you asking your kids to serve the margaritas out at the pool? I mean, what are you doing? you know, because in a lot of ways they're not ready yet for those types of opportunities and choices. As things get a little bit further along, because interestingly enough, and having worked in like Huntington Beach, and I'm sorry I'm ignoring you guys because I got everybody right here. Working in Huntington Beach and Irvine, one of the things that I have found out to be really, really obvious is the fact that most teenagers' first experience with alcohol and drugs is at home. That's their first experience, you know, and their first experience because they stole it out of your cupboard or they jacked it out of somebody else's house, you know, in terms of their medicine cabinet or whatever. A majority of the time, that is in fact the first experience that they have. Your reaction to it as parents is huge. You know, how you choose to approach it and what steps you take to following their choice to drink or use is probably the most critical thing. There are some, and the reason why I'll explain that a little bit, there are some people that from the moment they try a drug or some alcohol, it's on. You know, the game is on, without a doubt. We have ignited the time bomb. For some of us, it's, you know, quick. Sometimes it's slowly. For some of us, it actually never actually goes off. But at least it's ignited. And during adolescence, one of the things that happens is that unlike an adult, you know, we actually go through the stages of addiction a lot quicker. Where adult minds take a little bit longer, just because physiologically you guys are further developed and all that. But with a teenager, a 14-year-old for the first time smoking pot, hypothetically by the end of their senior year, they could already be on to Oxycontins, Vicodin, maybe even heroin. It just depends in regards to like how far things go for them. I will say this, my experience and exposure over the last 2 years, heroin is without a doubt becoming a huge problem. A huge problem in our, not just, you know, at school, but definitely in our community. I have never seen it grow faster than any other time, and I've been doing drug and alcohol treatment for 20 years, and it is unbelievably amazing. And it's happened because of a variety of things, but you know, kids get smoking pot, then they try, you know, someone turns them on to a Soma, eventually they get into like trying a Norco because that's a little bit harder, then they try a little bit of a Vicodin, and all of a sudden before they know it, they're trying or dabbling a little bit with Oxycontins. Oxycontins are expensive and heroin's cheap. And before you know it, I get more assessments now, more evaluations probably in the last 6 months of heroin addicts who are in high school, okay, smoking at least a gram a day every day. Than I ever have in 20 years. It's not ever been like that in my experience. So it is really, really, really scary. Evenings like tonight are hopefully an opportunity to be able to offset that on some small level, even if it's just one person to be able to deter that. My one recommendation for if you think, believe, or even suspect your kid to be using or dabbling in any drugs or alcohol is drug test them. That without a doubt, even though there's ways to get around it and all that kind of stuff, drug testing somebody is unbelievably viable, not just for you, but interestingly enough for them. You got to remember, it's not peer pressure that makes a kid use, it's the social acceptance that really in a lot of ways makes people use. There's very rarely is there a situation where a kid is like going to a party or whatever, or spending the night at somebody's house and everybody's lighting up a joint or, you know, smoking heroin or doing coke, and they're all standing around and going, do it. Come on, man, you got to make that, you got to hit that. It's really rare that that's the initial beginnings of it all. But what it is that there's a group of people or a sect or a little clique or whatever that seems attractive. You know, they got something going on. There's a little swagger in their step, whatever it may be. And they're cool or whatever that is. And there's a sense of like, if I want to belong to the club, I guess I do a little bit of this. That way there's a sense of being a part of. I mean, you have to understand adolescent development in order to understand that, because it really, really is a very vital stage in terms of autonomy, is being able to belong. I mean, probably one of the greatest needs that goes on with a teenager. If you watch teenagers that are not a part of belonging, we have the other issues that go on with depression and suicide. So it can be very, very impactful to not have a place that, or a set of people that you feel like you're a part of. When I tell you to drug test, one of the things that it does, and it does really great for the kid, is it gives them a reason to say no. Because it doesn't have to be them chickening out. You know, they can basically bottom line tell their parents, hey, or tell their friends or whatever, yeah, you know what, that sounds like fun, you know, I'd really like to do that, but my parents drug test me. And what it does is it helps them to save face, which is huge. It gives them, again, an out of being able to be in a social situation and not have to look like a wuss. And so I've always recommended to parents, I don't care whether or not you believe they do use or don't use, let them know you're going to test them. Because again, it gives them a great excuse. My 7th grader, who's 13 years old, got his first drug test 2 months ago. I know for a fact he doesn't do drugs. Okay, there's no indicator, there's no sign, there's a total athlete, the whole 9 yards. But I have planted in his head that doing drugs in my house is not going to be acceptable, and I'm going to go to great lengths to find out if you're doing it. Okay, I got little corners in my mouth. One of the other things too, I think, as a parent, is you have to stay checked in during adolescence. You know, while they're in high school, you really do need to stay checked in. And you got to know one thing: they want you to check out. They don't want you to be involved in their life. They're not going to answer any of your questions. They're not going to walk through the door a lot of the times and tell you what's happened in their world. They're not going to talk about a lot of their feelings. They want you to go away. You're totally a nightmare to them. You know, if you do have a great relationship, you know what? That's a total bonus. You know, continue to foster it. Continue to like make that channel open. But a lot of times, I mean, in my experience with teenagers, is that, you know, as part of the autonomy, that's just kind of the par for the course. It's kind of what happens. You know, you're not cool. Mom and Dad, you're not cool. Okay? So get over it if you think you're cool. And you don't want to be their friend. Okay? You still need to be their parent, which is another really, really, really important thing. Because if they don't need you yet to be their friend, you've got plenty of time when they're out of college to establish that kind of friend-based type of relationship. But don't do it during adolescence. Okay? They need you more than any time ever in their life to be a backstop for them. To be consistent, to be reliable, to be there. 100%, you know. It's ironic, there was a commercial, I don't know when it was, but about like this kid bitching and complaining about his mom and his dad or whatever it is, and then thanked them for having done that, because it kept them on a focus in terms of like being able to, you know, deal with issues that went on in high school. And I watch parents do that error. You know, I watch a lot of times parents think that if I just kind of pal up with them a little bit, and I can get them talking to me. And the reality of it is you're going to get them bullshitting you. I mean, that is the bottom line on it. That you're going to get them more bullshitting you than actually telling you the reality, because they're going to think you're all good and everything's okay. And because you're worried about them liking you or being mad at you or whatever, you're going to ignore simple signs and indicators that things are going on. So you want to keep the parent eye. Don't ever give it away, okay, in whatever it's worth. When addiction comes into play, it's pretty easy to see. But again, from my experience, and again, you know, I don't admit a lot of drug addicts to the program that I am involved in. I don't really we see addictive types of personalities. We see it definitely on its way. But when we look at addiction in its physical definition, I don't see a lot of it. You know, I really, really don't see a lot of it. I mean, I am seeing more and more with heroin, but I mean, really in a lot of ways, we don't see a lot of drug addicts in terms of the last stage or last 2 stages of addiction. But what we do see a lot of, we see a lot of drug abuse. You know, a ton of drug abuse. And drug abuse is defined at least 1 time to 2 times a week. That's the simplest definition, that once or twice a week they're engaged in either drinking or using or smoking pot or whatever it is. Drug abuse is without a doubt that middle stage. It is the only time you're going to have a chance to be able to do an intervention or prevention in regards to things, because you're not going to stop them from using. The weirdest thing in the world, I think, if you believe for a minute that you're going to stop your kid from using drugs, check yourself out, because it's not going to happen. You can do everything in the world to make it so that when they use, it'd be a totally miserable experience for them, unbelievably negative. But you're not going to be out there making choices for them. Okay? They're out there on their own making choices for themselves. You want to hope that everything that you've educated them on, and everything that you've offered them, and all the support that you're about, and the lovingness that goes on in your family, that will somehow, they'll come home and tell you that they did A, B, or C well. But the reality of it is that they're most likely going to go out there and make a stab at it. So what you can do, though, is without a doubt, even before you even find out whether or not your son or daughter's used anything, is to let them know what the consequences are going to be before they do it. Because that way, there's something that they can weigh out in front of them. Hey, is it worth it to me to go ahead and smoke pot tonight just because of whatever it is that's going on? And if I get caught, I'm busted for the next 3 weeks, grounded, lose my car, don't have any internet, they're going to take my phone away. Is it worth it? Because, again, that is the way to offset a little bit of the pressure of the acceptance factor out there socially. If you wait until the time in which they get busted, you lost, again, that opportunity for them to be able to make an insightful choice. Because they don't know what the consequences are going to be. I love the experience when the person goes out there for the first time on a Friday or Saturday night, some dance or football game or whatever, and went out and had a couple of drinks, lost track of time, kept drinking, lost more track of time, kept drinking, calls you up in a total stagger. You bring them home and they vomit all over themselves and all over the bathroom. They wake up the next morning and they're in pain. That's a beautiful experience. Not the one we welcome, trust me. Not the one any parent is hoping to experience in their lives, but that consequence of having that situation happen can be very, very powerful. If on top of that you couple already consequences that are going to naturally happen in your home, that is a bang-bang experience that young person has. And the next time they think about having a drink or smoking pot or whatever it is, they're going to think about not only how bad they felt that time, but also what's it cost for being able to make that choice. And that's kind of the thing that I wish and encourage for parents is that we want them to be able to make healthy choices. We want them to be able to learn to take care of themselves, not just drugs and alcohol, but other areas too. And who they associate with and how they evaluate relationships and all those types of things. And drugs and alcohol is just one component associated with that. When you see a kid who's actively using, again, like I said earlier, it's not as easy as it used to be to detect whether or not something's going on. It's a lot harder. The kids are gotten unbelievably sophisticated in my experience. They know how to get around drug tests. They know what kind of drugs don't come up on drug tests. They talk to their friends. As much as the internet has been this unbelievably great experience of giving us knowledge, it's also given them a lot of tools of deception. And we have to be just a little bit better. We need to not take our eyes off our children. Like I said, when they were 2 years old and you're walking through, Walmart or whatever it is, your eyes were glued to that kid, weren't they? For the most part, right? Okay. Shouldn't be any different now, right? It really shouldn't be any different now. You should still have that same focus. You might not see them all the time, but man, you should have that same focus. You should be having dinners 2-3 times a week, at least. Sit-down dinners, opportunities for forums in which you can be able to discuss things that are going on and pressures that they're having. The more you can get them to talk with you, and talk with you as a parent, not their buddy, but talk to them as a parent, where they're seeking advice, they're looking for suggestions, you're offering suggestions to them, the better you're going to have an opportunity to kind of divert them away from going down that lane. Because if we really think about adolescent addiction or use or whatever, it's very emotionally driven. It's probably the most emotionally driven time in which we see drug use. And the even harder part about it is that it doesn't look like adults. Adolescent use is very different than adult use. But the interesting thing about it is it's very similar in the emotional base of it. Kids drink and drink and use because of stress. That's actually, if you look at the stress levels that are in high school students, it's up there, really, really unbelievably high. Every day is an uncomfortable event potentially. There's a lot of uncertainty that goes along with teenagers. More than I think we actually are aware of, because we just assume they're doing okay. We look at their grades, and if they're B's and A's or whatever it is, we think, they're doing well. Yeah, academically, that's great that they're academically doing well. But the emotional stuff is what makes the difference in regards to what choices that they're making. And I get that it's really hard to pop them open and try to get them to listen to you or talk with you or whatever it is. But you got to keep trying. You have to be willing to put your pride and ego aside, because they're going to look at you like you're stupid, and try to engage them in being able to speak with you and talk to you about what's going on emotionally. Because for them, this is a new world, right? It's a completely new experience for them. They went from being a child and they're in this middle gap. And we look at them strangely enough and we want them to act like adults. And it ain't going to happen. Okay? So it's really important to not be delusional about that, because they're not adults. That's the reason why we're still watching them. It's the reason why the laws are the way the laws are. That's the reason why there's a lot of things in place so that they can make mistakes and learn from them. But we need to be a part of that learning with them. The minute we choose to check out because it's too hard to go talk to Johnny or whatever it is, the minute that kid loses the opportunity to be able to learn something from us. And if they're not going to learn it from us, they're going to learn it from the other set of people that they associate with which are all in the same ball game as them. So it's funny because, we think that who they hang out with is really, really key. And it is really, really key. I've seen groups of kids protect each other like no tomorrow. They got each other's back, and they say, hey, we're spending the night over at Dave's house, and Dave knows to pick up the phone and hang it up. Sophisticated manipulation. Really premeditated type of stuff. The fun part about it is in a lot of ways, that's kind of what they're supposed to do. But what we need to do is we need to be a little bit better. We need to be able to say, without any reservations, well, I'd like to talk to the parent. Well, that's cool if you're going to go to that party, but I want to know that there's a parent that's going to be there. And you want to drop them off. Now, nobody's coming to pick them up. You're going to go drop them off, and you're going to come pick them up. And there's not a lot to debate. And if they give you a bunch of debate, guess what then is going to happen? Well, I guess you're not going to go. It's really that kind of simple. We don't ever want to give up the power that we have. The hard part about it is that, the control is something completely different. But you really, as a parent, want to know that you never want to give up the power that you have. Because you can't control them. Remember? It's really, really important that you all know that you cannot control your kids. You're not with them 24 hours a day. It's illegal to chain them to the bed. You get in trouble. It's not a good thing. So we have to be able to put the nets and the boundaries around them so that they have a way to be able to rely on it. Let them use you as an excuse to not get loaded. And you want to give them every reason in the world to use you as an excuse to not get loaded. And if you can do that and build that around your teenager, you know what? You'll have a tremendous you'll have a great experience with your son or daughter. Because they will be limited in the opportunities to be able to go out there and get loaded. Remember, we can't stop them, but we want to make it unbelievably difficult for them to go out there and do it. That is our goal as parents. It is my goal as a professional working with families. And I let parents know when they come in the door, hey, you know what, for whatever it's worth, you're not going to be able to control your kid. It's just impossible, and sometimes there's kids that are way out of control, and there are systems to put into place when it's that bad. But one thing that you can do is make it miserable for them. Absolutely painfully miserable and difficult for them to go out there and get loaded. And if you can do that, and you can build that around your son or daughter, I can guarantee you will have a much different experience with this whole thing about drugs and alcohol. You have to keep your eyes open, though. So, anyway, I hope that helps in some way, shape, or form, gives you some insight or awareness. I brought a family with me, and I thought that it would be really valuable to see both sides of the street. From the young person's experience in regards to what his game was about and his drinking and using, and the mother, who is the mother of the son, in regards to being able to see what her experience and what it is that she did in her attempts to be able to divert drug and alcohol use. So I'd like to introduce to you